Coming up on Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, it's just you, me, and a multitude of science topics. Get ready to get dirty, people. Talk to me. It's coming up on Dr. Kiki's Science Hour.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit. Bandwidth for Dr. Kiki's Science Hour is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Dr. Kiki's Science Hour with Dr. Kiki Sanford, recorded Thursday, September 16th, 2010. Living the science life. This is Dr. Kiki's Science Hour, and I'm Dr. Kiki. Welcome to the show. This is 1 hour or so, and today it's just me and you, and we are going to talk about a lot of subjects. So this is a little bit different than the normal Science Hour of power, hour of science. A little bit different because I just wanted to kind of get feedback from people on a few issues. I wanted to talk about some neat stories that have passed across my computer screen in the last few days. Timely, yet at the same time, not specifically this week timely, but more generally related to who we are as humans, who we are as a society, where are we going, what's happening, why do we make the decisions that we do. Just some really interesting things that have come out and about. So what I'm hoping that we can do is that I will bring up story ideas. I have several stories here. One about sunspots changing on the face of the sun and how that's possibly going to affect the Earth and what that means for climate change and a whole bunch of other issues. And then another story about why skeptics discount science. And that one is from Ars Technica, and I want to thank Eric for passing along that story tip to me, and I think it's a great one to discuss. Additionally, we're going to take a look at epidemiology and how epidemiology has found the source of a disease in a little tiny town in Spain. What about government mind control? It's always a nice question to bring up. And finally, and most importantly, the smell of toast. So these are the issues that we're going to talk about today on the Science Hour. What I'm hoping that we can do is I'll just summarize the stories a bit and then take a look in the chat room and see how you guys are responding, what you have to say on the different topics. I'll read out some of the comments that you make, the intelligent, critical comments that you make in reply, and hopefully we'll have a really interesting conversation, although I will admit that from time to time when I am responding to things in the chat room, things pass by me, so I may not see your responses, and I apologize for that. If you want to respond directly to me, my name in the chat room is Dr. Kiki, Kiki, D-R-K-I-K-I, and so I hopefully will be able to pick up your comments as they pass on through. Additionally, sometimes I'm a little ADD when I read, so I might jump back and forth between different comments and different people, and so kind of hold on to the thread of the conversation. The ideas are going to be there, and we're just going to have a lot of fun. At least I hope so, and I think I'm going to have a lot of fun because these are fun stories. Okay. So let's break it down. First story for the day. Let me open it up here and get this all set up. I found this story on the Night Science Journalism Tracker. Let me see if I can get this. Hey, come back, window. And I found this story on the Night Science Journalism Tracker. And it's the Night Science Journalism Tracker, if you don't know about it, is a really great resource. Some journalists track different topics in the media and see what different media outlets are actually saying about them. And in this particular case, this story that they were tracking is out of the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, out of their Science Now publication, online publication, which is just kind of stories they see around and about that they comment on, then they write up. And this particular story is a little interesting. So there are a couple of researchers from the National Solar Observatory, and they have been reporting on the magnetic field strength in sunspots. Looking at the magnetic field strength and how it actually impacts the Earth, they suggest that diminishment of sunspot activity could have been the cause of a great cooling that took place in the 1600s and early 1700s that we now call the Little Ice Age. And what they're thinking may happen is that in the next 5 years, they've promoted this idea, this hypothesis, that in the next 5 years, sunspot activity is going to diminish, and we're going to see a reduction in the magnetic activity from the sunspots, and thus a cooling of the Earth that could last several hundred years, depending on how that sunspot activity occurs. So this raises all sorts of questions. You know, how does this actually fit into the entire climate change discussion? How does it fit into the global warming, or as other people from the 70s before, it was global cooling, and okay, maybe that's actually going to happen. Is this actually going to happen? We don't know for sure. This is a hypothesis. They're just looking at a bunch of data and trying to get an idea of how much sunspot activity is necessary to maintain a particular magnetic influence on the Earth's atmosphere, and thus maintain a particular temperature, or increasing or decreasing temperature on the planet. And then we start getting into the question of, if temperatures decrease, hey, great, we don't have to worry about temperatures on the planet anymore. What does that mean then for political and social processes that are currently in place to kind of reduce, to reduce carbon dioxide output, because that is linked to increasing temperatures. So how do all these things fit together? Temperatures start to decrease because of solar activity, but our carbon output continues to increase. What does that mean, and how can we see the issues plainly? So anyway, I'd love to get comments from people in the chat room. I'd love to hear what you think about this. So let me get over into my chat room. John E. says, for now, it's BS. Okay, so maybe it is BS. Maybe it's, maybe it's only two researchers looking at data, so this is definitely not a consensus at any point. This is, just a hypothesis. We do know that sunspots go through cycles, and we've seen that happen over and over again. Somebody asks here, does the TF Toya, does your position on the globe determine how much sunspot activity impacts you? Well, sure. It depends. It's going to affect, if you're in your summer or your winter, it's going to affect you a little bit differently. But overall, the activity, if it is maintained, so if it's a depression in some sunspot activity over 50 years, 10 years, 200 years, whatever the time period, whether or not you're in your summer or your winter, you're further or you're closer to the sun, really it's not going to make a difference, because eventually you're going to be affected by that magnetic activity at some point, it coming directly or more closely to your area on the globe. Someone else says, this sounds like a Republican setup. Well, I don't know that it is necessarily a Republican setup, but that is something that we need to consider, and the politics of this. This really is where science starts meeting politics, and there's a discussion that definitely will take place. If in 5 years sunspots do disappear, and we find that this hypothesis is true, the Earth's temperature starts decreasing, what is going to happen. GL Desater says, so we might survive the global warming from CO2 buildup, but still have the problem of ocean acidification. And I think that's a really important point to bring up. You want to think about and it is not something that is really discussed as one of the important aspects, the really, really important aspects of climate change. As carbon dioxide builds up in the atmosphere, we have there is a equilibrium that is reached between the atmosphere and the oceans. And the oceans act as a big sink, a big place where carbon dioxide can get soaked up and can be held in there. However, the chemistry of the oceans themselves are affected eventually by the amount of carbon dioxide that they soak up. So the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere increasing is going to increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the oceans. Amount of carbon dioxide in the oceans actually changes the pH, increases the acidity of the oceans. Decreases pH, increases acidity, if any of you remember basic chemistry there. And that can affect organisms in the ocean. So as acidity increases, you have an effect on calcification. So corals, any organism in the oceans that uses calcium carbonate to be able to create their exoskeleton, their shells, that process is going to be harder and harder to complete. And the process may actually lead to eventual breakdown. So if the acidity gets high enough, it can actually leach it away instead of just slowing down the process. The same way that if you poured a really, really strong acid on something, it just eats away at it. And if our oceans become like that, how are our oceans then going to support life? So we start looking no longer at the problem of climate change per se because of temperature changes and because of the changes in weather patterns throughout the globe. We start actually looking at the way that our oceans will be able to support us through the future. And so I think the conversation, this story just highlights the fact that everyone is talking about the wrong thing. Oh yeah, climate's going to change. Well, okay, whatever. Some people are going to benefit. A lot of people are not going to benefit. If sunspot activity stays the same, if temperatures continue to rise, there's going to be a whole bunch of trouble, right? But if we continue this, then we're going to find if the sunspot activity changes, temperatures decrease, and that is no longer the issue, we're still going to have a problem we're going to have to deal with. So I think that we need to just step back and start talking not about climate change anymore, but talking about this ocean acidification. That's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Okay, so back to the chat room, because I have talked a lot here. Publius says, it's known that the Earth's oceans have risen in human history. It's critical that we find a new way of building cities that makes it easier to mitigate the huge percent of the Earth's population to higher or lower ground. Mute says, solar is still the power source of the future. And Icon says, we'll need to pollute like crazy. Free the CO2 from the Earth sequestering, I say. Very funny. Nice joke. Wah, wah, wah. GL Desater suggests a TED Talk about ocean acidification by Rob Dunbar, D-U-N-B-A-R, Discovering Ancient Climates in Oceans and Ice. And then moving down even further, let's see, who else has said something directly at me here? I'm not seeing. I think there's a conversation going on in here, but I don't know what it is. Yeah, okay. Will it matter when 2012 comes? Well, the whole thing is 2012 is just a year like any other year, and that's just going to happen as anything else. Jess says, acidity increases, glaciers melt, ocean increases in volume, concentration decreases, and what's the biggest factor, temperature or CO2? I think that's a great question. I don't know what the biggest factor is. CO2 increasing, of course, is going to, I completely lost my train of thought. CO2 increasing doesn't have the same forcing effect on other greenhouse gases, whereas temperature increasing affects other greenhouse gases like water vapor. So water itself is a greenhouse gas. As temperatures heat up, there's more vaporization of water due to evaporation. So there's more water in the atmosphere that has an effect, the blanketing effect in the atmosphere as well. So temperature in that respect could continue to multiply exponentially the problems that greenhouse gases pose. CO2, on the other hand, doesn't necessarily have that same forcing. But if we continue to increase CO2 levels, how much are those CO2 levels going to counterbalance the effect of the solar activity? We still don't know that either. There are a lot of questions. I mean, what we do know is that carbon dioxide does have an effect on temperature. That temperature difference has other effects, and, definitely things are going to explode in terms of their complexity for us to deal with them. Darth Emma says, do I realize the solubility of calcium carbonate is inversely proportional to temperature, so warmer water means the calcium carbonate is less soluble? That's an interesting point as well. So I guess the question is how that feeds into the ability of the organisms that rely on it to actually take advantage of it. There's definitely something that's there. There are a lot of balances and counterbalances that in all the models that researchers use to study these issues need to be taken into account. And I do not know all of these issues. I do not claim to. I'm just bringing up another point that's I think an interesting point for discussion. Darth Emma says the increased acidity would very much overwhelm the temperature effect. Yeah, I think you're right there. I think I would agree with that. And isn't the solar cycle, asks Westlight, relatively short-term, 11 years, though part of a long-term cycle? Yeah, that's true. So and right now we are at the very beginning of an increase in the cycle itself. So we're going to see increased solar activity before it starts to diminish again. I'm not sure what suggests to these researchers that we're actually going to see a diminishing beyond normal, one that would actually highly affect the Earth's overall temperature and lead to an ice age. The astronomers Matthew Penn and William Livingston say they see a trend from their data, and they've only analyzed 20 years of data, so it's not as though they're looking at hundreds of years of data or even thousands of years of data to make their announcement. So this is a very short, 20 years in terms of geological cycles is very short term. However, this is just something that they've brought up, and I think it just merits contemplation and discussion. Curtis B. says the last solar cycle was unusually quiet with temperatures increasing, I think that's interesting as well. That's very interesting. Web 1750 says, why don't I start with how all this so-called global warming started? Cap and trade. And why only CO2? It's a big scam so far. The idea we're able to change the climate is ridiculous. And this brings me to my second story. Dun, da, da. We're going to change topics here. There is a story in Ars Technica, which I found fascinating. This was written up by John Timmer, and it's a review, a summary, and a commentary on a study that was published in the Journal of Risk Research by some researchers, and it also a recent Pew survey. So, and I think the comment from what was his name? Webb 1750. Very nice of you to give us your real name in this commentary. Is skeptics discount science by casting doubts on scientist expertise. Now, this is the main point of the study that was reviewed by John. So in this story, what they basically looked at was the question. They have a model. They looked at the question of why do members of the public disagree sharply and persistently about facts on which expert scientists largely agree. So the opinion that this climate change, global warming thing is a scam, that is not the consensus of the scientific public at large. The scientific community largely agrees that climate change is occurring and it is being affected by human activities, anthropogenic climate change. So the second question that they got into, they have a model that they call the cultural cognition of risk. And they say it refers to the tendency of individuals to form risk perceptions that are congenial to their values. And so John Timmer says this wouldn't apply directly to evolution, the scientific study of evolution, but would to climate change. If your cultural values make you less likely to accept the policy implications of our current scientific understanding, then you'll be less likely to accept the science. Kind of, okay, so I don't want to believe this, so you're wrong. I don't believe you. Why should I trust you if I don't want to believe that? They go on to say the cultural cognition thesis predicts that individuals will more readily recall instances of experts taking the position that is consistent with their cultural predisposition than ones taking positions inconsistent with it. So this is what the scientists say in their study. They looked at 3 different issues. They looked at climate change and whether it's anthropogenic. They looked at the safe handling and storage of nuclear wastes. And they also looked at the safety implications of concealed carry laws having to do with weapons. Where they basically looked at this, they broke down people's personal beliefs with a series of questions to find out where they fell on a scale of individualistic versus hierarchical and egalitarian / communitarian scales. So we have the individualists and the egalitarians. So on a scale, we basically, individualists would be at one far end and egalitarians would be at the other far end in terms of their beliefs. And then they were given statements about the different scientific issues. So one statement they might see in this survey would be global temperatures are increasing. And then they would be asked whether or not expert scientists that were part of this questionnaire agreed with the statement. So do expert scientists agree with the statement that you were just given? On the questions of global temperatures increasing, 78% of the people who, 78% of the egalitarians, the communitarians, were more likely to agree with the statement. And on the statement of humans being the likely cause, 68% of those that were more egalitarian agreed with the statement. In contrast, 56% and 55% of the individualists felt that the experts were divided on the topics. And so this is a significant faction that actually felt that most experts disagree with the consensus opinion. A similar breakdown came with concealed weapons laws. Individualists thought that half of them thought that the experts agreed and that they were good for public safety, and 40% thought the experts were divided. And then John says roughly the same number of egalitarians agreed that the experts were divided, but nearly half thought the exact opposite of the individualists. Basically, that the experts thought that the experts disagreed, that they decreased violent crime. So he comes down to, at the end, it's not a matter of the public not understanding the expert opinions of places like the National Academy of Science is one example of an organization that gives out opinions. It's not that people don't understand the expert opinion. It's just that they simply discount the expertise that's associated with any opinion they'd rather not hear. All right, so I'm going to take a look at the chat room and see what people are saying in the chat room here about this story. What do you all think? Do you agree? TF Toya says, because the internet has given us the ability to seek out otherwise dubious information and gives any of us the ability to feel like an armchair researcher. Publius says, a study of history will show that modern science is routinely corrupted or politicized by money. Okay, so are politics. I mean, I don't think it's modern science, because really modern science hasn't been around that long. I think more so if you look at politics in general, politicians, our government, and all that stuff. But anyway, that's my opinion. Never mind. I'll move on from that comment. Pat is saying that I should talk to Mark Pelletier on Skype. Darth Emma agrees with the opinion in the story, it sounds like. Euchre is saying the academic community has become a greatly self-serving group of self-validators, and this is why people view academic science with its own skepticism. That's really interesting. That's a fascinating it's a fascinating idea. I think Dr. Mom has a good response to that. The public should question the experts. It's the best way to learn and improve the data. And I think that's a really interesting point. So if, like, Euchre believes that scientists are a bunch of self-serving people who are only going to pat each other on the back and agree with each other all the time, which if you listened to, I think it was last week's show, it's really not. We do find that with the internet the way that it is now, the idea and the ability for you to interact with scientists, to be able to ask questions. I mean, if you go to places like publications like the Public Library of Science or even Nature or any other, there are places to comment and to ask questions about what you see. I think that I think that there is a point where, yeah, there needs to be more public involvement in the science itself, so that the public doesn't feel so separated from it. I mean, the fact that I have a word like the public that I use, there's a division there. And there shouldn't be. I mean, I shouldn't say the public, the scientists. There should be more communication. And I believe that we're on a path to lead to more communication at this point in time. Darth Emma, or Dr. Mom and Darth Emma, we have, I think it was a week or two ago, we did, or it was last week, it was either last week or 2 weeks ago. I don't remember I think it was last week though. We did talk a lot. I talked with, there were a lot of people commenting from the chat room, it was with Dr. Stephen Novella, exactly, that we were discussing the scientific method and how the scientific method, and what we were discussing with him was basically with relation to medicine. We were talking about how there have been problems there, but also how the system works and why the system works the way that it does. I mean, we covered it. We covered an awful lot of information about the scientific method. And I don't think, Publius, that last week's show was the tip of the iceberg of corruption. I mean, if you see corruption everywhere, I mean, it's just too rampant. There are too many honest people doing their work for the corruption to be everywhere. The majority of scientists are just scientists doing their jobs. The fact that there is this kind of distrust by certain people, certain individuals, it makes me sad. It makes me very sad. I mean, yes, I'm not going to say there is no corruption. I'm not going to say that there is, no falsification of data, because sure, scientists are individuals, but you can't judge the group by one individual. And that's what I would hope that you wouldn't do for any group of people. So when, somebody in a corporation goes bad, you don't judge the whole corporation. Or I think there's just a really interesting conversation here. Dr. Mom is saying, in her honest opinion, no true scientist is insulted by a question from someone who wants more information. And I think that's absolutely true. I think anybody who's a real scientist is interested in what people want to know. And sometimes they know the answer, because maybe it's about the question is about how or why they designed an experiment the way that they did. Sometimes they don't know the answer, and maybe that's interesting. That could lead to an interesting path for inquiry. Scientists are always into questioning. Let's see. What other comments are in here? So Euchre comes back and says, because a scientist said so is an argument that I get from many people about various topics and different standpoints without actually comprehending the material and people they cite at all. I don't think that's necessarily a fault of the scientific institution. I think that, maybe is more the fault of individuals who don't know how to really access the information and understand the information. So scientists know a lot about a particular topic. They study a lot about it. However, they don't know everything about it. No one individual can know everything about everything, right? So that's why we have consensus and multiple individuals coming together, and not just individuals, but the work. And when we talk about work, we talk about the research and the data that results from it, and the analysis of that data that has repeatedly, over and over again, found the same result. Or found, so this is why we have the theory of evolution. This is why we say that there is a consensus about climate change, anthropogenic climate change. I mean, it's not just a whim. It's not a scam. It's, it is, and there has to be a point at which there are organizations that you trust. So the National Academy of Sciences, it's a group of scientists, hundreds of scientists from across the United States, from multiple disciplines, who work together to review material to create consensus on certain topics, or to bring up the fact that there is no consensus on a particular topic and that there's a lot to still discuss, which is very exciting in science. So I think that trusting, just, you can trust particular individuals, but only so far. You want to back up, if they don't back up their information, you go back up their information. Go find out more. Go look for organizations that are trustworthy. I think it's a problem. Let's see. Publius says he wants to start sending me information. Big Pharma has settled over 100,000 lawsuits. Now, I'm not... Big Pharma, to me, is not the institution of science. So that is, to me, something they supposedly use science to create medicines, to create drugs that will cure or help treat diseases. But yeah, there's a money driving behind it. It's a corporation with money interest. So yeah, of course there are going to be health issues there. there are definitely going to be health issues there, and honesty issues and corruption issues. So I think that's a problem also. Maybe people are misinterpreting or confusing corporations and big pharma for the rest of the science institution, the stuff that's just basic science, where people are just trying to find out how things work. That's an interesting idea. Icon says maybe it should be pointed out that there are actually very few scientific facts. Great point, Icon. Thank you. Thank you very much. Publius says the only way to thwart corruption is to trust but verify. Yes, I agree with you on that. Absolutely. GL Desater says when an individual's beliefs are in accord with science, they quote scientists to support their belief. When their beliefs are in discord with science, the scientists are evil and working for the man. Yeah, and that's pretty much what the study that was summarized in Ars Technica actually found. So the big question there is, is there any way around it? Or are we always, as our society is split almost half and half between individualists and egalitarians, are we always going to be arguing in the same way? Is there ever going to be any way around it? And, I hope that there's some way to get around it. But at the same time, human nature is human nature. It's very interesting. Web 1750 says when scientists are involved in politics, the outcome will be in favor of the big money, not science. I don't know that's true. I can only hope that scientists get involved in the politics because they're tired of their science being misinterpreted. Euchre says, again, science to the average public is what they are delivered, and there's too much bias in most means of delivery. Absolutely agree with you there. There's a lot of bias. I mean, even I have my biases. I try to ask questions, but I have my own opinions in the way I look at the world. So, to watch this show even is to see the world slightly through my eyes and the way I see it. That's why it's great to watch all sorts of different shows and get as much unbiased information as you can. Rich asks, do I feel that science is viewed differently between scientists who work for the private sector versus the public? I think it's very possible. There has to be an attitude shift in how you do science when you go into the less academic pursuits and more corporate pursuits. Just because the timelines are different, the end results are different. So it's not necessarily just the science that's important anymore. So maybe, yeah, but I don't know. I haven't seen any studies to that effect. That's just, just have to be my opinion of looking at the situation from the outside. Moontree says, look at how the scientific community is policing itself. As an example, by and large, it roots out bad science. And that's true. And that is the scientific process at work. When something goes wrong, it's because the scientific community has brought it out and is saying, okay, researcher did bad. Let's point that out and use it as an example. You stop that. Don't be bad anymore. Darth Emma mentions that the difference between science and religion is based on faith. Science is based on testing to try to disprove an idea. Yeah, and that's just, it's not necessarily religion, even that's the question or the point. It's the difference between belief versus testing and actually trying to go through a process to verify and validate information and ideas. And do I think that science will get more and more major in the schools, says Sally Chicken? I hope so, but I doubt it. Unfortunately, I doubt it. We're way through this show. Very exciting so far. You guys have had a lot to say. I do appreciate all of the commentary. Publius, thank you. He says the show last week was his first sign of hope that he has seen in a long while. He went to Dr. Novella's site and he had so many absolutes that he's not confident of what's true. Michael Crichton used to tell a story of a speech at his med school graduation where he was told that 25% of what he had learned had already been proven wrong. Yeah, well, science is never... That's what Icon was bringing up, is that there's not really much scientific fact. There is a lot of scientific information, however. Let's see. I am going to move on. I just want to thank everyone for watching and listening to the show so far. Let's go into some kind of interesting success stories of science. I like success here. This is a story about epidemiology, and this story was sent to me by David Eckerd, and it comes from Yahoo News, Live Science originally before that, but this was published in a different, I don't know where it was published actually. But anyway, there's a disease, Legionnaire's disease, that was causing all sorts of deaths in a Spanish town called Alcoy. Now, they couldn't figure out where the disease was coming from. Legionnaire's disease is caused by a Legionella pneumophilia. It's a type of bacteria. It's kind of hard to locate the source of Legionnaires, where the bacteria are hanging out sometimes whenever there's an outbreak. But this city has seen outbreaks before, and they're trying to figure out where exactly these outbreaks are coming from. So some epidemiologists, researchers got involved and started tracking where people who had been infected with the bacteria had been during the 5 to 10 days previous to their being diagnosed. They started mapping those areas together to see if there was any crossover. There really wasn't. There were a few crossovers, but not really. It started in one area of the city and then suddenly showed up in a couple of different areas. So it didn't seem to make any sense. And so then they had to look at the city itself and look into what was happening in the city and if there were any big projects that could potentially be moving water from one place to another. So this Legionella bacteria likes water. So they found out that there was a big public works roads program going on where they're digging up asphalt, grinding up old asphalt, and then spitting it back out. And there was this old piece of machinery with a water tank on it that was blowing a fine mist of water out into the air. And this fine mist of water, the original source of the water was from a spring that was not on the city's water supply. So the spring water itself was not cleaned, or there was nothing. It was just piped up from the earth, from a well. Turns out that was the source, and they shut down the water. They shut down that piece of machinery, and maybe, the people who run it might use some bleach next time. I don't know, but it's a very interesting case, and the researchers, the epidemiologists who have worked on this, are really excited because additionally they were able to match the genetic strain of the Legionnaire's bacteria in the people that had infected the people absolutely with the bacteria in the water tank. So they found a great combination. Dr. Mom says, there you go. Stagnant water strikes again. Yeah. Stagnant water can be a big problem. It's a breeding ground for all sorts of nasty things. Yikes. But anyway, it's an interesting, it's a really, I think, a success story for epidemiology, and I think a very interesting example of how epidemiology today is looking at cities, at people's activity, at what's going on, to be able to pinpoint the sources of outbreaks. And I just think this kind of thing is going to get faster and better. And so as we put together the observational techniques along with the genetic techniques, we'll be able to actually, it's like putting together forensics with people's activity. So it's kind of neat. GL Desater asks, how long before the crazies think that the town was trying to kill people off by spraying contaminated water around? Yeah, there are probably some people who think that. It's probably just more like the company who was hired happened to have this well on their property, and they just, they're probably not in town because they have a bunch of trucks. And anyway, there are probably all sorts of diseases or explanations for what happened here. Does anybody have any comments about this other than interesting? Basic shoe leather epidemiology, says Dr. Mom. Yes, it is. And Dr. Mom also says AEIOU, which is, I guess, to somebody. If you want to drink water, never, ever look at it under a microscope. Yes. Yeah, don't necessarily look at it under a microscope unless you're curious. But, I'd say the same thing about your eyelashes or, your skin. There are a lot of things you don't necessarily want to know about, right? Exactly. Another fun story that I really love this week is the question of government mind control. And I think this one was sent to me by Monkey. And this is on the Device website with the headline, DARPA wants mind-controlling helmets for soldiers? Yikes. Is that a little bit scary or what? This, I think, is really interesting. What they are planning to do, researcher Dr. William Tyler is working on this DARPA-funded project at Arizona State University. They are working on using transcranial pulsed ultrasound to be able to affect soldiers' moods. So the idea being that they could create a helmet that soldiers would wear that would calm them down during firefights, or once they're wounded, help them to relax and not stress out as much. Another idea is that it could boost his awareness and even make him feel his injuries less, so that you'd have a soldier that could just keep on fighting. Quote from the professor, to overcome limitations in the research. So the limitations being, well, it's kind of hard to do it, just from a helmet. Usually you got to stick some stuff inside. Transcranial meaning across the skull. Usually you have to use some kind of brain implants, something of a sort, and that's not necessarily going to work for the average soldier. It says to overcome the above limitations, this laboratory has engineered a novel technology which implements transcranial pulsed ultrasound to remotely and directly stimulate brain circuits without requiring surgery. Further, we have shown this ultrasonic neuromodulation approach confers a spatial resolution approximately 5 times greater than transcranial magnetic stimulation and can exert its effects upon subcortical brain circuits deep within the brain. Yikes. Hello. Joel H., magnetic waves. Yes, so that's the idea. They're using magnets and magnetic waves, magnetic signals, to affect electrical activity, neuronal activity within the brain. And if they have a helmet that has lots of magnets around it and they know which magnets to turn on for what, they can pinpoint, triangulate on certain areas of the brain, within the brain, and affect the neural activity. Dr. Mom says, isn't that what they do in shock therapy? But I believe that with shock therapy, they were using actual electrical stimulation, whereas with this, it's magnetic. So it's basically induction, where they're using magnetic fields to induce changes in electrical currents. So this is I personally think it's neat and scary. And I'm not questioning the fact why DARPA is interested in something like this. Eventually, it'll probably, trickle down to the rest of the population at some point. But I don't know. Oh, sorry, Dr. Mom. Anyway, Shadow Tiger asks, how long until you have to wear these to your white-collar job? Yeah, good question. Or why would they even have to make you wear a helmet if you're in a nice little cubicle that has little magnets around it that can strong enough to actually just pinpoint your brain and affect you? Interesting. Mech Man says, how long would it take them to turn it into a total remote control, if possible? Or going the other way, when we can read brainwaves to operate when can we read brainwaves to operate a gyroscope in a large powered battle suit or a battle mech? That kind of stuff could be really neat. So the other direction, being able to read electrical signals from the brain to actually control machinery. So using your brain to actually control devices is something that I don't think is that far off. And I think these are probably on parallel tracks in terms of their research timing and how things are moving. However, the other direction, the direction of brainwaves to controlling devices, is probably on more of a fast track, since it's not just the military controlling battle mechs and that kind of thing, but also people who are paralyzed and want ways to be able to get around and affect their environment in which they can't currently because they can't move their limbs. So I think because there are injured people who have a stake in that one as well, that might move a little bit more quickly. Other people are saying in here, GL Desater says, this will be bad. Yeah. Who knows? Who knows where it'll end up? He says, just think of the NASA experiments on equilibrium where they used magnetic fields to upset the volunteers' balance. Not a good thing to lose on the battlefield, but they were affecting the vestibular system. And so if you're not just affecting the vestibular system, but focusing on other areas of the brain, it would not necessarily have that kind of an effect. Publius says, a huge percentage of excess human capacity is currently diverted to war, and he'd like to see a trend toward technology for the advancement of the creative attributes of humanity. Yeah, why can't we put money towards that? That'd be great. Go talk to the government, right? Euchre says, think we can make the opposite device by using coils to absorb the thoughts inductively. And yeah, that's a similar question to what was brought up by Mechman and the idea of reading brain waves to be able to control devices. Absolutely, the opposite device. I don't know that it's not the magnetic signals. We do give off a magnetic field, but I believe that the electrical field is readable very easily, more easily. You can read from the electrical signal on the scalp, and there is a lot of research going in that direction of reading the brain. Researchers just a couple of weeks ago or last week published a study that suggests that they are able, or getting to the point, just from a small array of electrodes implanted on the surface of a few volunteers' brains, able to make out the differences between different words as a person is reading those words. So they had a test where they had individuals reading words, and then they analyzed the electrical signal from the electrodes, and were actually able to differentiate what words people were reading based on the signal in the electrodes. So that's moving an interesting direction as well. That could be very fun. GL Desater says, yes, for the balance issue, going back to the balance issue, helmets move. The helmet might intend to stimulate one area, but if it's moved, it would stimulate a different area instead. Yeah. Yeah, so things to think about, right? There are definitely things to think about. Dr. Mom says, here it always amazes me on how the military can ignore the medical Geneva Oath to not experiment on people without their consent. Yeah, I don't know if they're not allowing them to consent. I'm sure they're consenting at this point. Little Hamlet asks, could this be used to stimulate parts of the brain to affect mood? Yes, and that's part of what they're working on. in fact. JC Wayne says mind controlling robots is also easier because we're more adaptable than the technology. Very true. Very true. Good point, JC Wayne. So I think it's almost time to hit the end of the hour. I have one last story to bring up, just some, after these fun things. And this is actually a video I wanted to share with you. Let's see if I can get it to play without having to play an ad. I'm probably going to have to play an ad, so I'm going to keep the volume down on that for just the next 27 seconds. This is from the BBC's website, and it has to do with the smell of toast, which I think everyone is, not everyone. I like toast. Do you like toast? Why do you like toast? What is it about toast that you appreciate?
It saves to get.
Is it coming out? I'm not hearing anything. Boy, it's not working. Hold on. Hold on. No audio. Let me fix this. It's probably going to make me see the ad again, isn't it? Okay. We try again. Let's get the audio in this. I think I've got... I think I have it set up right. It should just go out. Why? Why the trouble on the video? Yes, toast equals the smell of caramelized sugars, Dr. Mom. You are correct. I love that. Let's go to widescreen, full screen. There we go.
It's the smell of fresh toast. But if you've ever wondered why that smell makes us happy and hungry, well, scientists at Cardiff University now have the answers. 46% of us feel comforted or are reminded of home when we smell toast cooking. It's a childhood memory that we put to the back of our minds as we get older, but which re-emerges whenever we smell toast. Well, we put that to the test in this Cardiff cafe. What does the aroma of toast mean for these diners?
Yeah, childhood, whether it be at home or whether it was on holiday in a guest house.
Of home, and my mother, where we used to toast by the fire.
The research was carried out by the School of Biosciences at Cardiff University, and it seems our love affair with toast all boils down to chemicals.
One of the compounds that's formed by this sort of chemical reaction that occurs when you cook bread is called furanone. And furanone is one of a number of key ingredients in the odour of toast, which has particular odours associated with it that evoke these memories.
The study also reveals our favourite toast topping. And you can forget jam or marmalade because 53% of us prefer plain old butter or marge. Although that might be up for discussion.
Patty.
Shredless marmalade.
Cheese on toast.
I used to like dripping.
So the next time you put a slice of bread in the toaster, just remember your brain is tapping into happy childhood memories. Although there's also the possibility that you might just be a little bit peckish.
So what is it for you? Childhood memories? Do you have childhood memories of toast? I try and think back about it. I like toast. I love toast. I love the smell of toast, and it's got to be that furanone that the researcher mentioned. It's got to be the wonderful smell of furanone that stimulates whatever it is that makes me love toast so much. Those nice warm mornings, eating eggs and toast or toast and butter, whatever. I never really had the whole British breakfast growing up, having come from the Central Valley of California, but toast was a big part of it. What about all of you? CWBP says, Chem Reviews published a great paper on molecular gastronomy, and in the chat room gives the address for that. Euchre says, you like the smell of skunks, and it's because of childhood memories when you moved to the country. Publius, we're habituated to the foods that we grow up with. Little Hamlet, gonna go out to buy a loaf of bread after this is done. Thanks, Dr. Kiki. You ruined my South Beach diet. You're welcome. You're really welcome. Pat has had dreams about toast. That's very good. And Nerd with No Life, gasoline smells better to me. Maybe because of go-karts or something. I definitely know that there's something wonderful about the smell of rocket engines. Definitely the smell of that, the burned rocket engine. There's a little soft spot in my heart for that, for sure. And I'm sure that has something to do with childhood rockets as well. Christopher Tien says, can they replicate the same chemical reactions with an alternative to actual toast? That's a great question. And I don't know if they've done those studies, but that would be a really great study to do. Go do it. Chemistry, gastronomy, chemical gastronomy at the best. Moontree asks, why do some people experience the taste of burnt toast moments before a heart attack? That probably has something to do with the chemical metabolites that are being released by the body at the time of that incident, the infarction. But yeah, I don't know exactly why. It's a great question. If anyone out there knows, Dr. Mom's taken off already, unfortunately, so she can't answer that question for you. I'm sure she would know the answer to that. Shadow Tiger says, I think it's just our brain being happy when recognizing the smell. I think that it's purely false association to say that we have emotional connections to toast. But why would your brain be happy? Shadow Tiger, is there any reason for your brain itself to be happy? I think it has to do with emotional connections, personally. That's what I would say. Hip says yes, rocket engines and JP5 jet fuel. And Dr. Kiki asks, Pat, why would you want to cut out the toasting bread? Yeah, you got to toast it. Toasting is great. The Maynard reaction, it's wonderful. Wonderful reaction that occurs. The caramelization, the actual, it's the amino acids in toast that change and create during the Maillard reaction during the toasting of bread. And it's very similar to other smells that we love so much, caramelized onions, different things. So anyway, on the note of toast, something warm and comforting and happy, I will leave you at the end of this week's Science Hour. Thank you all for watching. I do appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days to listen to the show, to watch it, however way you consume this media. I appreciate the fact that you do. For more information, you can find probably when the show is up, you'll probably be able to find the links to the stories I mentioned if you're interested in checking them out yourself at the show page, the show notes page, which is www.twit.tv/Kiki. Additionally, I'm Dr. Kiki, and this has been the Science Hour. We're done for the week. Next week, you are the center of the universe, at least according to some geocentrists who are having a conference with me to talk about this wonderful idea. Next week will be the bad astronomer himself, Phil Plait. So stay tuned for next week. We're going to have a great show. In the meantime, you can follow my science-y pursuits on Twitter, on Facebook, everywhere across the web. Just Google me. I'm Dr. Kiki, dr.kiki. And additionally, you can check out Twists, This Week in Science, every Thursday night, live at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time on the Twit Network. Just like Dr. Kiki's Science Hour is Thursday afternoons, 4 p.m. Pacific time on the Twit Network. You can find Twists at www.twis.org for a fun romp around the science track. I'll see you next week. Thanks again for tuning in. And all I ask is one hour of a week out of your week. See if I can say that clearly. Yeah, 1 hour a week to make your world a whole lot more interesting. Hope this week was thought-provoking. See you next time.